Jonathan Hickman and artist R.B. Silva's second installment in their summer 2019 X-Men event is now out. Powers of 10, number 1, follows House of X, number 1, and gives us a glimpse at important points in the X-Men timeline. Year 0, when the X-Men were founded. Year 10, which is the present day. I'm going to jump 100 years into the future, and then 1,000 years into the future. The end game, if you will. All of which, of course, are Powers of 10, hence the name. In Year 0, when Moira is talking to Professor Xavier, we see a series of fortune tellers cards. One of them has a character showing Kitty Pryde's wall-phasing power and is entitled the Magician. That character, of course, is Rasputin IV. We get to see Rasputin IV in the Year 100 timeline with a captured Scylla Bell and a dying Percival and this red Nightcrawler-looking character named Cardinal. Appropriate being red and all. The bird species is a nice bright red color, but it also seems like his name is Priest. Cardinal's from the third generation mutants made by Mr. Sinister, and I'll explain that in a moment. They have these passive powers where they refuse to fight, they refuse having personal names, they're obsessed with more creation than destruction. So when she calls him Cardinal, it's more like me calling you human versus your actual name. So no individual names, but it's the name of their subspecies, if you will. His powers seem to be of Azazel and Nightcrawler, which is also interesting because Nightcrawler at one time wanted to be a Catholic priest, and Rasputin does call him priest. In this scene, Rasputin's talking telepathically with Scylla Bell, who is captured by some advanced sentinels, and she leaps from the wreckage and runs into action, her soul sword ablaze in this fiery blue flame. She calls Scylla Bell her little sister, and that's interesting. Is that a term of endearment, or is she actually Rasputin V? Scylla Bell Rasputin, engineered in a different program. We're not quite sure yet. We do learn that Mr. Sinister created a program based on the planet Mars, which was focused on mutant genetics and breeding mutants together, with the focus of creating mutants with these militaristic and aggressive traits. And they'd go up against the Earth-based Sentinels from the Hound program. They're the Hunters and then the Hounds as well. It actually turns out that Scylla Bell was a Hound, and what the Hounds are mutants bred in captivity to hunt other mutants. And once they find them, they call in the tanks and these big Sentinels. And the Sentinels are led by an advanced Nimrod-class Sentinel from the Days of Future Past storyline named, appropriately, Nimrod. And in this alternate future from Powers of 10, mutants were bred in underground pits on the planet Mars, raised to 6 years old, and then sent to the nation-state of Krakoa to fight. The next few generations bred by Mr. Sinister were called the Chimera generation. He gave rise to a new class of mutants called the Chimera-Class. The second gen mutants had DNA from 2 different X genes. The third generation amalgamated DNA from up to 5 X genes. Now there was a fourth generation bred of Omega-class mutants, which we learned about in House of X, but they destroyed nearly everything, including themselves, and it was later learned, we see in Hickman's prose, that this was all part of a long-term scheme that Sinister had concocted, but once discovered, it was publicly executed by the man-machine supremacy. But it was because of this betrayal that Krakoa fell and led to the post-apocalyptic future that we see. Rasputin, more appropriately Rasputin IV, is a third-generation Chimera-class mutant. In current X-Men lore, the Rasputin family has 3 siblings, Illyana, Peter, and the eldest of the 3 is a villain named Mikhail Rasputin. Now this would make Rasputin the 4th, hence the IV Roman numerals in her name, 4. It appears she has taken the namesake of the lineage, of course, which is her name that she's going by. While she has the DNA of Colossus and the weaponry of his sister Magik, it may be just a symbolic thing, but she does certainly have their DNA. Rasputin IV's power set is from the DNA, like I said, of 5 different mutants. The soul sword, though, is not a power. Somehow she came into contact with Illyana, who gives it to her, or maybe she finds it, but based on some of the upcoming covers, Magik, well, the Rasputins really seem really important to this story that Hickman's telling. Alright, so here's the breakdown of Rasputin IV's power. She has power from Quentin Quire, aka Kid Omega, and he's listed in House of X as an Omega level mutant. His Omega power is telepathy. Rasputin IV uses this exact same power when we're first introduced to her. Now Peter Rasputin, aka Colossus, is of course Magik's older brother. Colossus has the ability to turn his skin to a hardened metal, and we see that on her as well. Gunther Bane debuted back in X-Men number 8 from 1964 as a villain and uses the name Unus the Untouchable. His power is to create a force field around himself. From the tarot card where we first saw her, we knew she could phase through walls. This DNA is from Kitty Pryde, the mutant known as Shadowcat. The way she does this is not by affecting the wall, but by making her own body intangible. And Rasputin IV's 5th power set is pulled from the DNA of Laura Kinney, the Wolverine clone known as X23. She has the healing factor and probably the berserker rage as well. On the power scale, her metal skin metamorphosis is a 6, telepathy is a 5, force field power is a 3, and both healing and intangibility are a 2. This unique power set gives her a distinctive and decisive tactical edge. She has good balance with offensive and defensive powers, so she's really good on the battlefield. And that's basically all we know at this point about Rasputin IV, which is an unexpectedly good amount, right? I'm sure as the story progresses, we'll learn a lot more about her and her connections with Colossus and the Magik family. She's a prominent leading character in the 100 Years story, so I'm sure there's going to be many more reveals to come. Stay tuned to this channel as we unveil more in future videos. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let's continue this conversation in the comment section down below. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.